The argument started on the deck of a battered ship in the middle of the Pacific. Alexander Selkirk stood facing his captain, his voice cutting through the wind and crashing waves. The ship was rotting. The hull leaked. Supplies were disappearing faster than they could replace them. Selkirk was certain the vessel wouldn't survive much longer. He warned the captain, told him continuing the journey meant death, that the ship would sink before reaching safety. But the captain refused to listen. Tempers flared. Pride took over. And in a moment of anger, Selkirk made a decision he would regret instantly. He said he would rather be left behind on the island than sail another mile on the broken ship. The captain called his bluff. Within minutes, Selkirk's belongings were lowered into a small boat, a musket, a knife, a cooking pot, some tools, a Bible, a few pieces of clothing. Then Selkirk himself was set down on the shore. The small boat pushed away. The sails were raised, and the ship began drifting into the distance. Selkirk shouted, waved his arms. The reality hit him all at once. He had made a terrible mistake, but the ocean swallowed the ship from view. And just like that, Alexander Selkirk was alone. No towns, no people, no passing ships, no rescue coming. Only a wild, uninhabited island surrounded by endless water. If you think being stranded for a few days sounds terrifying, wait until you hear how long he was forced to survive here. Because what happened next shouldn't have been possible. He would survive here, completely alone, for over 4 years. Alexander Selkirk had never been meant for a quiet life. Born in a small Scottish village, he was restless from a young age. Rules never held him. Stability bored him. The sea, however, promised adventure and danger. As a young man, Selkirk signed on with privateers, government-approved raiders who hunted enemy ships during wartime. They weren't merchants. They weren't explorers. They were hunters. The voyages were brutal. Months at sea, storms that shattered masts, battles that ended in bloodshed, disease that wiped out crews faster than cannon fire. Every journey was a gamble between fortune and death. Selkirk became skilled, strong, used to living on the edge of survival. He sailed across the Atlantic, around South America, through waters filled with pirates, warships, and treacherous storms. But life aboard these ships was never peaceful. Captains ruled with iron fists. Supplies were scarce, tempers flared often, and disagreements could turn deadly. It was on one of these harsh expeditions that Selkirk found himself aboard a deteriorating vessel in the Pacific Ocean, a ship that groaned with every wave, a ship he believed was already doomed. Day after day, he watched water seep through the hull. Wood splinter, repairs fail. Fear grew in his mind. He became convinced that staying aboard meant certain death, and that fear led him to challenge his captain. A confrontation that would soon place him on a lonely shore and change the course of his life forever. The moment the ship vanished over the horizon, the silence set in. No voices, no creaking wood, no crashing sails, just the wind moving through trees and waves rolling endlessly against the shore. Selkirk stood alone on the beach, staring out at the empty ocean. The reality of what he had done crashed down on him. He had traded a broken ship for complete isolation. His supplies were painfully small: a musket with limited ammunition, a knife, a hatchet, a cooking pot, some tools, a Bible, and a few pieces of clothing. That was all he had. No shelter, no map, no way to signal passing ships. The island was wild and unfamiliar. Strange sounds echoed through the jungle at night. Creatures moved unseen in the darkness. Fear followed him everywhere. At first, Selkirk made a crude shelter inside a cave near the beach. It offered little protection from rain or wind. Cold nights crept in. Hunger came quickly. Loneliness hit harder than the physical danger. He spent hours staring at the horizon, hoping to see sails. Days passed, then weeks. No ships came. With every sunrise, the truth became clearer. Rescue wasn't coming anytime soon. Selkirk later admitted that during those early days, he fully expected to die. He believed he would survive only a few weeks at most, starving, exposed, alone. The island felt less like a refuge, and more like a slow death sentence. At first, the beach was Selkirk's only safe place. It was open. He could see the ocean. He could watch for ships. But that safety didn't last. As weeks passed, something began to change. Large sea lions started arriving on the shore. At first, only a few, then dozens, then hundreds. They crowded the beach in massive roaring groups, fighting, bellowing, crushing everything in their path. The noise was constant, the smell unbearable. Soon, Selkirk couldn't move along the shoreline without being surrounded. They blocked access to the water. They trampled the area where he gathered food. The beach was no longer livable. With no choice, Selkirk was forced to move inland, into the thick jungle, a place even more dangerous and unknown. The forest was dense, the ground uneven and slippery. Sharp rocks cut into his feet. Strange animals darted through the undergrowth. Every step felt like a risk. At first, he thought going inland would kill him even faster. But then he began to notice something. Freshwater streams, wild fruits, edible plants, and most importantly, animals, goats. Dozens of them, left behind years earlier by passing sailors. Suddenly, the island wasn't just a prison. It was a place filled with potential food, milk, and materials for survival. What had felt like a deadly jungle was slowly becoming his only chance to live. With new resources around him, Selkirk knew survival meant adapting. At first, he hunted the goats with his musket. Each shot was precious. When the gunpowder began to run low, he was forced to change his approach. He learned to chase the goats across the rocky terrain. Day after day, his legs grew stronger, his balance sharper. Eventually, he could outrun them. He crafted traps, caught them alive, kept some nearby for a steady supply of meat and milk. From their skins, he made crude clothing, sewing pieces together with sharpened tools. The garments were rough, but they protected him from cold nights and sharp brush. He moved away from the cave and built shelters inland near a freshwater stream. Simple huts made from wood and grass, strong enough to survive storms. Inside, he boiled meat in his pot, stored supplies, and created a small, livable space. But the island had another problem. Rats, large ones. They crawled over him while he slept, bit at his hands and feet, threatening infection. Sleep became nearly impossible. Then Selkirk noticed the wild cats that roamed the island. Slowly, he fed them, tamed them. They began staying near his shelters. At night, they hunted the rats, guarded his sleeping space. Over time, Selkirk transformed. The frightened man who had expected to die within weeks was gone. In his place was a hardened survivor, clothed in goat skins, moving swiftly through the jungle, living in shelters he built with his own hands. The island was no longer just where he was stranded. It had become his world. Even as Selkirk grew stronger, the island never stopped trying to kill him. One day, while chasing a goat across the rocky hills, his footing slipped. The ground gave way beneath him, and he tumbled down a steep cliff. His body slammed against stone, over and over, until everything went dark. When he finally came to, pain shot through every part of him. He couldn't stand, couldn't walk, barely breathe. He lay there at the bottom of the cliff, exposed to the elements, certain this was how it would end. For days, he drifted in and out of consciousness. No food, no water, only the burning pain of broken bones and bruises. Strangely, the goat he had been chasing had fallen with him. Its body had cushioned part of the impact, likely saving his life. Slowly, Selkirk forced himself to crawl back toward shelter. Each movement felt impossible, but he survived. Another time, before he had tamed the cats, the rats nearly finished him. They swarmed him in the night, gnawing at his fingers, chewing his toes. He woke up bleeding, fighting them off in panic. If it hadn't been for the cats eventually keeping them away, infection or blood loss could have ended his life. Storms also threatened him constantly. Winds tore through the jungle. Rain flooded the ground. Cold nights weakened him. At every stage, death hovered close. Not once, but again and again. The island wasn't just testing him. It was trying to break him. Years passed with no sign of rescue. Then one day, Selkirk saw something on the horizon. Ships, 2 of them, anchored near the island. For a moment, hope surged through him. After so long alone, salvation had finally arrived. He ran toward the shore, ready to signal them. But as they drew closer, his excitement turned to fear. They weren't friendly ships. They were Spanish. At the time, Spain was an enemy. If they found him, Selkirk wouldn't be rescued. He would be captured, likely tortured, or forced into brutal labor in mines. Without hesitation, he fled back into the jungle. The Spanish sailors came ashore, searching the island for fresh water and supplies. They spread out, moving closer and closer to where Selkirk hid. At one point, a group of them passed so near that he could hear their voices. They fired shots into the forest, believing someone was there. Selkirk scrambled up a tall tree, pressing himself against the trunk, heart pounding, barely breathing. The men searched beneath him, even stopped and relieved themselves at the base of the tree, but never looked up. After hours of searching, the Spanish finally gave up and returned to their ships. They sailed away. Selkirk remained hidden until they were gone. Freedom had nearly slipped through his fingers. If they had spotted him, his story would have ended right there. As the years dragged on, time began to erase the man Selkirk once was. His clothes slowly rotted away. The fabric tore, fell apart, until only scraps remained. He replaced them with rough garments made from goatskins. His tools wore down, blades dulled, handles cracked. When his knife finally broke beyond use, he fashioned new tools from bits of metal he found washed up on the shore. An iron barrel hoop, scraps from old wreckage, anything he could reshape into something useful. His hair grew long. His beard grew thick and wild. Soon he barely recognized his reflection in pools of water. Physically, he became stronger than ever, but mentally, the loneliness weighed on him. Days passed without hearing a human voice, weeks without seeing another person, months without hope. At times, despair nearly overwhelmed him. He later admitted he often felt on the edge of losing his sanity, but he refused to give up. Every morning, he climbed to a high lookout point, scanning the horizon, searching for sails. Whenever he spotted anything that even looked like a ship, he rushed to the shore and built signal fires. Again and again, most days, nothing came, but the routine kept him alive. Hope, no matter how small, kept him moving forward. He believed someone would eventually come. He had to believe it. In early 1710, more than 4 years after Selkirk had been left behind, the horizon finally changed. From his lookout point, he spotted ships approaching the island. Not one, but two. Their shape looked different from the Spanish vessels he feared. These ships appeared English. His heart raced. Once again, he rushed toward the shore. This time, he didn't hesitate. He gathered wood and built a large signal fire. Smoke poured into the sky. The ships noticed. A small boat was lowered and sent toward the island. As the crew came closer, they saw a strange figure waiting on the beach. A man dressed in animal skins, with long hair, a thick, wild beard, moving swiftly across the sand. When the landing party stepped onto shore, Selkirk could barely speak. Overwhelmed, after years of silence, words struggled to come out. Then something remarkable happened. One of the men recognized him. It was a former crewmate, someone who had sailed with him years earlier. Shock spread across the crew's faces. They had believed Selkirk was long dead. Yet here he stood, alive, stronger than many of them. After more than 4 years alone on a deserted island. Against all odds, Alexander Selkirk had survived. When Selkirk was left on that island, he believed he would last only weeks. Starvation, exposure, isolation, all of it seemed unavoidable. Yet against everything nature threw at him, he endured. Not for days, not for months, but for more than for years. Alone, with no human contact. No rescue, no certainty that anyone even remembered him. He transformed from a stranded sailor into a self-sufficient survivor, built shelters, hunted food, tamed animals, and preserved his sanity in complete isolation. His incredible ordeal would later inspire one of the most famous adventure novels ever written, the story of Robinson Crusoe. But unlike fiction, Alexander Selkirk's survival was real. One of history's greatest real survival stories. So now I want to ask you, do you think most people today could survive even 1 year alone like this? Or would the isolation break them long before hunger ever did? Add your thoughts in the comments section. Like and subscribe to the channel for more.